The kitchen light flickered when Marcus Whitfield pushed through the service entrance at 3 in the morning. Rain hammered the skylights overhead. He'd returned early from Singapore, the merger documents unsigned in his briefcase, his mind churning with worry about his son. 6 days without improvement. The specialists in New York had offered nothing but concerned frowns and requests for more tests. He moved through his estate's corridors without switching on the main lights, his footsteps absorbed by Persian runners that cost more than most people's annual salaries. The house felt different at this hour, stripped of its daytime pretense, just walls and shadows, and the persistent fear that had driven him home 14 hours ahead of schedule. The nursery door stood slightly open. A thin band of amber light escaped into the hallway. He heard humming, low and rhythmic. A melody he didn't recognize. Marcus approached silently, his hand reaching for the doorknob, then freezing as the scene inside registered. Nina Lawson sat in the rocking chair he'd imported from Switzerland. His son James cradled against her chest. Her uniform top was unbuttoned. The child was nursing. The humming stopped. Nina's eyes opened and met his through the doorway gap. Neither moved. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the windows like an accusation. Then Marcus shoved the door fully open. "Step away from my son." Nina didn't startle. She shifted James slightly, allowing him to detach naturally before adjusting her clothing with practiced efficiency. The baby made a small sound of contentment, the first peaceful sound Marcus had heard from him in over a week. "Mr. Whitfield, you're back early." "I said step away." She rose slowly, transferring James to the crook of her arm. The child's breathing was deep and even. His tiny fist curled against Nina's shoulder. She moved toward the crib, but Marcus intercepted, taking his son with movements too sharp for the quiet hour. "You're dismissed. Immediately." Your son was dying. The words hung between them. Marcus looked down at James, studying his face in the low light. The hollow cheeks had filled slightly. The tremor in his limbs had stilled. The formula wasn't working. Neither was the donated milk from the bank. His body kept rejecting everything. "I'm a registered pediatric nurse, Mr. Whitfield. I've seen failure to thrive before. I know what it looks like when an infant starts shutting down." "So you decided to—" Marcus couldn't finish the sentence. "I lost my daughter 8 weeks ago. Stillborn at 37 weeks. My body doesn't know she's gone." Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a grinding sensation like tectonic plates realigning. He looked at Nina properly for the first time since hiring her 3 weeks prior. She was younger than he'd assumed, maybe 30. Her eyes held the exhaustion that had nothing to do with night shifts. "That doesn't give you the right." "No, it doesn't. But watching another child slip away while I could help? That's not something I could live with." "Get out." Nina nodded. She gathered her medical bag from beside the chair, checking that James's monitors were properly attached before walking toward the door. At the threshold, she paused. "The medication list is updated in the log. He'll need another feeding in 3 hours. The night nurse from the agency won't know what to do if he refuses the bottle again." Then she was gone. Marcus stood in the nursery holding his son, listening to the rain and the steady beep of monitors. James stirred, his mouth working in his sleep. Searching. Marcus reached for the prepared bottle on the warmer. The baby turned his head away. By dawn, James had refused 4 bottles. His crying grew weaker with each hour. Marcus paced the nursery, his shirt soaked with sweat, despite the climate control. He'd called the pediatrician twice. The man was driving over from Westchester, an hour away, at minimum. Marcus pulled up Nina's personnel file on his phone. Her credentials were impeccable. Johns Hopkins nursing degree, specialized training in neonatal care, 7 years at Mount Sinai's NICU, before taking private positions. Her references praised her skill and dedication. Nothing in the file mentioned her loss. The doorbell rang at 7. Dr. Harrison swept in, all efficiency and concerned glances. He examined James thoroughly while Marcus hovered nearby. The verdict was delivered in careful medical terminology that essentially meant the child was destabilizing. We should readmit him. Get an IV line started for nutrition. He was improving. Last night, he was actually improving. What changed between last night and this morning? Marcus said nothing. Dr. Harrison waited, then began packing his equipment. I'll call ahead to the hospital. They'll be expecting you within the hour. After the doctor left, Marcus sat in the kitchen staring at his phone. Nina's number was on the emergency contact sheet. He'd already typed and deleted 6 different messages. Outside, the rain had softened to a persistent drizzle. The house felt cavernous around him. Upstairs, James's crying had stopped. That worried him more than the sound itself. He called. Hello? Don't hang up. Silence on the other end. Then, is James okay? No. How long since he ate? 7 hours. He heard her sharp intake of breath. In the background, a bus rumbled past. I can be there in 40 minutes. 20! I'll send a car. Marcus met her at the door himself. She'd changed into regular clothes, jeans and a cardigan that had seen better days. Without the uniform, she looked less like staff and more like any other woman dealing with private grief on a gray morning. Where is he? Nursery. She took the stairs 2 at a time. Marcus followed, watching her check the monitors before lifting James from his crib. The baby barely responded. Nina settled into the rocking chair without ceremony, adjusting her cardigan and positioning James with the expertise of someone who'd done this thousands of times. But her hands shook slightly. Leave us. I'm staying. Then be quiet. It took several attempts before James latched. Nina whispered encouragements Marcus couldn't quite hear. When the baby finally began to feed, her shoulders dropped with relief. Marcus stood by the window, watching the rain trace patterns on the glass. Neither spoke for 20 minutes. How long? He finally asked. How long what? Can you maintain this? Months, maybe longer if needed. The body adjusts to demand. And you're willing to? Nina looked up at him. What are you asking? I'm asking you to save my son, whatever that requires, whatever it costs. It's not about money, Mr. Whitfield. I know. She studied his face, searching for something. Then she looked back down at James. I have conditions. Name them. I live here. Full access to James's medical records. Final say on his feeding schedule. No questions about my methods as long as he's improving. And complete discretion from your staff. Done. And I want it in writing. A formal contract. I won't be dismissed again without cause and proper notice. Marcus nodded. I'll have my lawyers draft something today. James finished feeding. Nina lifted him to her shoulder, patting his back gently. He burped. A small, ordinary sound that somehow felt monumental. When she stood to place him in the crib, Marcus noticed she moved differently, like someone carrying extra weight. Not physical, but something heavier. I need to get some things from my apartment. I'll send someone. I'll go myself. I need an hour. After she left, Marcus called his assistant to cancel his meetings for the week. Then he sat in the nursery watching his son sleep. Real sleep. not the fitful dozing of recent days. The monitors showed steady improvements in all vital signs. He thought about his ex-wife Julia, somewhere in Switzerland with her yoga instructor. She'd walked out when James was 2 months old, claiming she wasn't meant for motherhood. The divorce papers were still unsigned on his desk. When Nina returned, she carried a single suitcase and a worn teddy bear. She found Marcus still in the nursery. That was 90 minutes. Traffic. She unpacked with quiet efficiency, taking the guest room closest to the nursery. Marcus watched from the doorway as she placed the teddy bear on the dresser. It was pink, with a ribbon around its neck that had once been white. Her name was Sophia. Marcus didn't know how to respond to that, so he didn't. Nina continued unpacking. I'll need a space for my medical supplies and a small refrigerator for the nursery. I'll have them delivered today. Thank you. The next weeks developed a rhythm. Nina lived like a ghost in the house, appearing only for James's care and meals. She kept detailed logs of every feeding, every milestone. The baby gained weight steadily. His skin lost its gray undertone. He began reaching for objects, responding to voices. Normal infant things that felt like miracles. Marcus worked from home more often, conducting meetings from his study while keeping one ear attuned to the nursery. Sometimes he'd find Nina in the library, reading medical journals or typing on her laptop. They rarely spoke beyond necessary updates about James. One evening, he found her in the kitchen at midnight, heating soup from a can. She looked up when he entered, spoon frozen halfway to her mouth. I can cook something proper, she offered. It's fine. You're not kitchen staff. He pulled out a beer and sat across from her. The kitchen felt different at night, less formal, just two people who couldn't sleep. He smiled today, Nina said. A real smile, not gas. I saw. It's a good sign. His neurological development is on track. Marcus took a long drink. Can I ask you something? She nodded. Why pediatric nursing? Why choose to be around sick children? Nina stirred her soup slowly. My mother died when I was 7. Lung cancer. The nurses at her hospice were the only ones who told me the truth. Everyone else kept saying she'd get better. But Nurse Patricia sat with me and explained what was happening. She didn't lie. I decided then that I wanted to be the person who didn't lie to scared kids. And now? Now I'm the one being lied to by my own body. It thinks Sophia is just in another room. Waiting. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, wind moved through the trees. Marcus wanted to say something comforting, but everything felt inadequate. James is lucky to have you, he finally managed. He's lucky to have a father who came home early from Singapore. That surprised him. He hadn't told anyone about cutting the trip short. Your assistant called looking for you. She mentioned you'd left without signing the merger. It can wait. Nina finished her soup and washed the bowl. As she passed his chair, she paused. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone who wouldn't sit in the kitchen at midnight drinking domestic beer. After she went upstairs, Marcus remained at the table. He thought about the merger, about the board's increasing frustration with his absence, about Julia's latest email demanding a larger settlement, about the way Nina had looked holding James that first night, like she was holding the entire world together with her arms. His phone buzzed, a text from his mother in California. When do I get to meet my grandson? He'd been putting her off for months, first because of Julia's departure, then James's health issues. Now he had no excuse except the truth, that he didn't know how to explain Nina, the arrangement, the necessity of it all. Marcus typed back, soon. The next morning brought complications. His household manager, Mrs. Chen, cornered him in his study. There's talk among the staff. About? The nurse. Her involvement with James. It's unconventional. Has anyone complained formally? No, but there are questions, concerns. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Mrs. Chen had run his household for 6 years. She was efficient, discreet, and usually right about personnel issues. What kind of concerns? She keeps unusual hours, refuses help from the other staff, and there are sounds from the nursery at night. Singing. Some of the staff find it unsettling. She's caring for my son. Successfully, I might add. Of course, sir. I just thought you should be aware of the atmosphere. After Mrs. Chen left, Marcus walked to the nursery. Nina was there, reading to James from a medical textbook. She glanced up at his entrance. Immunological development in premature infants. Riveting stuff for a 4-month-old. He likes the sound of voices. Doesn't matter what you say. The staff is asking questions. Nina's expression didn't change. Let them ask. It could become a problem. Only if you let it. That afternoon, a process server arrived with papers from Julia. She was accelerating the divorce proceedings and demanding sole custody of James. Marcus stood in his foyer reading the allegations. Parental negligence, inappropriate childcare arrangements, failure to provide stable environment. He called his lawyer immediately. How the hell did she know about Nina? Someone on your staff, most likely. These things have a way of getting out. We need to be proactive. Get ahead of the narrative. What narrative? That I hired a qualified nurse to save my son's life? That's one way to frame it. Julia's lawyers will frame it differently. Marcus hung up and went looking for Nina. He found her in the garden with James in a carrier strapped to her chest. She was examining the rose bushes, talking quietly to the baby about photosynthesis. We have a problem. She listened without interrupting as he explained the custody threat. When he finished, she adjusted James's sun hat and met his eyes. I won't let anyone take him from you. It's not that simple. If this goes to court, they'll question everything. Your methods, your background, your loss. Then we tell the truth. The truth doesn't always win in custody battles. Nina stood, one hand supporting James's head. Then what do you suggest? I don't know. My lawyer wants to get ahead of it. Control the narrative. By doing what? Hiding me? Pretending I'm just regular staff? Would that be so bad? She looked at him for a long moment. Yes, it would be bad. For James, for you, and for me. I won't pretend I'm not saving your son's life. That evening, Marcus's mother arrived unannounced. Eleanor Whitfield was 73, sharp as a surgical blade, and took no prisoners in conversation. She swept into the house with the authority of someone who'd raised 4 children and buried 2 husbands. Where's my grandson? Marcus led her to the nursery, where Nina was preparing for the evening feeding. The 2 women assessed each other like boxers before a match. You must be the nurse everyone's whispering about. Nina Lawson. Eleanor Whitfield. I hear you're keeping my grandson alive through unconventional means. I'm feeding him, Mrs. Whitfield. It's the most conventional thing in the world. Eleanor's eyes narrowed, then she smiled. Good. You have spine. Marcus, leave us. Mother, go. Make yourself useful. Order dinner or something. Marcus retreated to his study, but could hear laughter from the nursery 20 minutes later. When he finally ventured back, he found his mother holding James, while Nina packed away supplies. This one's a keeper, Eleanor announced. Don't mess it up. Mother, it's not like that. I didn't say what it was like. I said don't mess it up. Over dinner, Eleanor interrogated them both with the efficiency of a Senate hearing. Nina answered every question directly, even the uncomfortable ones about Sophia. Marcus watched his mother's expression soften incrementally. "Julia's an idiot," Eleanor finally declared over dessert. "Any judge who'd give her custody over Marcus needs their head examined." "You haven't heard her allegations," Marcus said. "Don't need to. I know my son, and I know a good woman when I see one. Nina, dear, do you have a good lawyer?" "I'm not sure why I'd need one." "Because Julia's going to come after you, make you the villain in her little narrative. We need to be prepared." "We?" Nina asked. "Of course we. You're family now. Anyone feeding my grandson is family." That night, after Eleanor had retired to the guest wing, Marcus found Nina on the terrace. James slept peacefully in her arms. The lights of the city glittered in the distance. "Your mother's intense. She raised 4 kids mostly alone. Had to be." "What happened to the other 2? She mentioned 4, but I've only heard about you and your sister." Marcus sat in the adjacent chair. "Thomas died in Afghanistan. Marine helicopter pilot. Sarah overdosed our senior year of college." "I'm sorry. It was a long time ago." "Doesn't make it easier." They sat quietly. James stirred, making small sounds in his sleep. Nina adjusted his blanket. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said. "Sure." "Do you ever think about what happens when he doesn't need you anymore? When he's weaned?" Nina was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. "Every day." "And?" "And I try not to think beyond tomorrow. It's safer that way." A week later, the first reporter called, then another. By noon, there were photographers at the gate. Someone had leaked the story. "Millionaire's secret wet nurse," read the online headlines. The articles were salacious, full of speculation and unnamed sources. Marcus's lawyer arrived within the hour. "This is a disaster. Julia's team is going to use this to paint you as unstable, perverted even." "That's ridiculous. Perception matters more than truth in these situations. We need Nina to disappear for a while." "Absolutely not," Nina spoke from the doorway. "He's right. I should go." Marcus turned. She stood with James in her arms, her face composed but pale. "You're not going anywhere. This is hurting your case. James needs you to win this custody battle. James needs you to keep him alive." The lawyer interjected, "There are other options. Wet nurses from agencies. Discreet, professional. He won't take from anyone else. We've tried." "Then we need to control this narrative now. Press conference. Full transparency. Doctor's statements about James's condition. Make it medical, not personal." Nina shook her head. "That won't work. The moment they see me, a black woman nursing a white millionaire's baby, the story writes itself." "Then what do you suggest?" the lawyer asked. "We tell the whole truth. Not just the medical parts. All of it." Marcus looked at her. "Including Sophia?" "Especially Sophia." The press conference was scheduled for 3 days later. Marcus's public relations team worked around the clock to prepare statements, anticipate questions, coordinate with medical experts. Nina refused all coaching. "I'll speak for myself," or "not at all." The morning of the conference, she dressed carefully in a simple navy dress and cardigan. Professional, but not trying too hard. Marcus watched from the doorway as she fastened a small silver necklace. A tiny star pendant. "Was that Sophia's?" "I bought it for her. Never got to put it on her." The hotel ballroom was packed. Cameras lined the back wall. Reporters filled every seat. Marcus's lawyer made opening remarks about medical necessity and professional health care. Then Nina took the podium. She spoke for 12 minutes without notes, about losing Sophia, about her training in neonatal care, about finding James in crisis and making a decision that haunted and healed her simultaneously. She didn't cry, but her voice carried a weight that silenced even the most cynical journalists. I understand this situation is unusual, uncomfortable for some, but discomfort doesn't negate necessity. James needed what I could provide. I provided it. Any parent would understand that choice. Any nurse would make it. The questions came fast and harsh. Are you being paid extra for this service? No. My salary remains the same as when I was hired. What's your relationship with Mr. Whitfield? I'm his son's nurse. But you live in the home? Many private nurses do. It ensures continuity of care. How long will this arrangement continue? Until James no longer needs it. One reporter, older than the rest, raised his hand. Ms. Lawson, how do you reconcile your grief for Sophia with your attachment to James? Nina paused. The room held its breath. I don't reconcile it. I carry both. James isn't a replacement for my daughter. He's a child who needed help. Helping him doesn't diminish my loss. If anything, it honors it. The coverage that followed was mixed, but more sympathetic than expected. Medical experts weighed in supporting Nina's actions. Parenting groups debated the ethics. But the photographers stopped camping at the gate. Julia's response came through her lawyer. She wanted to meet Nina. The meeting was arranged at a neutral location, Marcus's lawyer's office. Julia arrived looking perfectly composed in designer clothes that probably cost more than Nina's monthly rent had been. She studied Nina with cool assessment. So you're the woman nursing my son. He's Marcus's son. You gave up custody when you left. I gave up nothing. I took a break from an impossible situation. Your son almost died during your break. Julia's composure cracked slightly. That's not... I didn't know he was sick. Because you didn't ask. Marcus intervened. What do you want, Julia? I want to understand what's happening in my son's life. He's not... Marcus started. He is my son, Julia interrupted. Biology doesn't change because I struggled with postpartum depression. The room went quiet. Nina spoke first. Were you diagnosed? After I left, my therapist in Geneva. Are you being treated? Medication and therapy, 3 times a week. Nina nodded slowly. That's brave. Getting help. Julia's eyes filled. I couldn't hold him without panicking. Every cry felt like proof I was failing. Leaving seemed kinder than staying and breaking completely. But now you want custody? I want to know my son. To try again. Is that so wrong? Marcus's lawyer started to speak, but Nina raised her hand. No, it's not wrong. But James is fragile. He needs consistency right now. Disruption could set back months of progress. So what do you suggest? Visits. Supervised at first. Let him get to know you slowly. Build trust. Julia looked at Marcus. Would you agree to that? Marcus struggled visibly. You left us. Both of us. I left because I was drowning. That doesn't mean I stopped loving him. Over the following weeks, Julia visited 3 times, always with Nina present. She watched Nina feed James, learned his signals, his preferences. The 3rd visit, she asked quietly, Could I try? Nina helped position James, showed Julia how to support him. The baby fussed initially, then settled. Julia's tears fell silently as she fed her son for the first time in months. I thought I'd never be able to do this. You're doing it now, Nina said. The custody hearing was postponed twice as the parents worked toward an agreement. joint custody with Marcus as primary. Julia would have scheduled visits, increasing as James grew stronger. Nina's role was formally recognized as medical necessity. One evening, as spring began to soften the edges of winter, Marcus found Nina packing boxes in her room. "What are you doing?" "James is taking bottles now. Formula mixed with pumped milk. He doesn't need direct feeding anymore." "So, you're leaving?" "My job is done." Marcus felt something tear in his chest. What if it's not? He's healthy, gaining weight, meeting milestones. "I'm not talking about James." Nina stopped packing. "Then what are you talking about?" "Stay." "As what? Staff? I won't be the help you're sleeping with." "Who said anything about sleeping together?" "Then what are you asking?" Marcus struggled for words. "I'm asking you to stay because this house is better with you in it. Because James loves you. Because my mother threatens to disown me if you leave. Because I can't imagine walking into that nursery and you not being there. That's not fair. None of this has been fair. Not losing Sophia, not Julia leaving, not James almost dying. But you made it bearable. You made us a family." Nina sank onto the bed. "I don't know how to be part of a family anymore." Marcus sat beside her, careful not to touch. "Neither do I. But maybe we could figure it out together. And if it doesn't work, then at least we tried." She was quiet for a long moment. "I can't be your rebound from Julia." "You're not. You're nothing like Julia. That's the point. Don't love me because I'm her opposite." "I don't love?" Marcus stopped. The word hung between them. "That's not what I meant." "What did you mean?" He turned to face her fully. "I meant that when I see you with James, I see the mother he deserves. When you laugh with my mother, I hear music I forgot existed. When you told those reporters the truth about Sophia, I saw strength I didn't know was possible. If that's love, then yes, I love you, but not as a rebound. As Nina. Just Nina." She studied his face. "I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of replacing her. Of not being enough. Of losing another child. Of loving someone who could leave." "I won't leave." "Everyone says that." "I came back from Singapore. In the middle of the biggest deal of my career, I came back. Because something told me James needed me. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was fear. But I came back. I'll always come back." Nina reached for his hand. Her fingers were cold. "If we do this, we do it slowly. No grand gestures, no public declarations. Just us, figuring it out. I can do slow. And I keep my own room until I'm ready." "Of course." "And we tell James the truth when he's old enough. About all of it. Sophia, Julia, how we met. Everything." She squeezed his hand. "Okay. Okay? I'll stay." The relief that flooded through Marcus felt like drowning in reverse. Like breaking the surface after too long underwater. Over the next months, they found their rhythm. Nina moved her things gradually into Marcus's space. First a toothbrush. Then a sweater. Then books on his nightstand. James grew stronger, started crawling, then pulling himself up on furniture. His first word was "Mama," directed at Nina. His second was "Dada," accompanied by reaching for Marcus. Julia visited regularly. The awkwardness faded slowly, replaced by something like friendship. She started dating a finance professor from Columbia. Someone stable, she said. Someone who understood her particular kind of broken. Eleanor moved into the guest house permanently, claiming the main house needed supervision. She taught Nina to cook Marcus's favorite meals and told embarrassing stories about his childhood. The three women formed an unlikely alliance, united in their determination to raise James surrounded by love rather than conflict. On Sophia's birthday, Nina asked to be alone. Marcus found her that evening in the garden, planting rosemary. For remembrance, she explained. He knelt beside her, helping pack soil around the roots. They worked in silence until the plant stood steady in its new home. She would have been one today. Tell me about her. Nina sat back on her heels. She had so much hair. Dark like mine, but curly. The nurses said they'd never seen so much hair on a newborn. She was perfect for 17 minutes. 17 minutes? That's how long I held her before her heart stopped. 17 minutes of being a mother. Marcus pulled her against him. She didn't cry, just rested there, letting him hold the weight she always carried alone. You're still a mother, he said. 17 minutes or 17 years. You're still her mother. And James's? If you want to be. I already am. The custody arrangement was finalized on a Thursday. Marcus kept primary custody with Julia having weekends and holidays. Nina's role was officially recognized as medical caregiver and guardian in absence of parents. The judge, a grandmother herself, praised their ability to prioritize James over personal conflicts. That evening, they celebrated quietly. Chinese takeout in the kitchen. James in his high chair, throwing rice. Eleanor telling stories about her own custody battle 40 years prior. Julia stopped by to drop off James's favorite toy, stayed for tea, then left with promises to see them Saturday. This is weird, Nina said after Julia left. Which part? Marcus asked. All of it. Ex-wives having tea. Living in a house worth more than my entire neighborhood. Being a mother to a child I didn't birth. Good weird or bad weird? Just weird. Different. Like I'm living someone else's life. Eleanor spoke up. You're living your life, dear. It just took an unexpected turn. Several unexpected turns, Marcus added. Nina looked around the kitchen, at James painting his face with sweet potato, at Eleanor discreetly feeding the dog under the table, at Marcus, his tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, looking nothing like the terrified man who'd stormed into the nursery months ago. I love this life, she said quietly. Marcus reached for her hand under the table. Even the weird parts? Especially those. Later, after James was asleep and Eleanor had retreated to watch her shows, Nina and Marcus sat on the terrace. The city spread below them, lights like scattered stars. She leaned against his shoulder. I've been thinking about Sophia's things. What about them? I want to donate them. The clothes, the crib, everything I bought. Some other mother needs them. Are you sure? I've been holding on to them like holding would bring her back. But it won't. And keeping them locked away feels wrong now. We could do it together, if you want. Nina turned to look at him. You'd do that? Of course. Even though she wasn't yours? Marcus cupped her face gently. She's part of you. That makes her part of us. The donation was arranged through the hospital where Nina had delivered. They needed supplies for mothers who arrived with nothing. Nina packed each tiny outfit carefully, wrote a note to include, "From Sophia, with love." At the hospital, the social worker accepted the boxes with tears in her eyes. These will help so many families. As they walked back to the car, Nina felt lighter, not free from grief, but free from its weight. Thank you, she told Marcus. For what? For making space for all of me. Even the broken parts? Especially those. James's first birthday arrived with fanfare. Eleanor insisted on a party. Nothing huge, she promised, then invited 40 people. the house filled with colleagues, neighbors, and Julia's family who'd flown in from Boston. Nina felt overwhelmed until Marcus's sister, Patricia, arrived. "You must be the miracle worker," Patricia said, pulling Nina into a hug. "Mom hasn't shut up about you. I'm just the woman who saved my nephew and tamed my brother. That's miracle enough." The party swirled around them. James destroyed his cake with enthusiasm. Julia and her new boyfriend took pictures. Eleanor held court on the terrace, regaling guests with embarrassing stories about Marcus's youth. Nina found a quiet moment in the kitchen. Marcus found her there. Hiding? Breathing. Want to escape? Can we? He took her hand, led her through back passages to his study. They could hear the party continuing below. Better? Much. They stood by the window watching guests in the garden. James toddled between adults, chocolate covering his face and shirt. "He's happy," Nina observed. "So am I." She looked at him. "Really? I have my son healthy and thriving, my mother living close, a reasonable relationship with my ex-wife. And you? In that order?" He pulled her closer. "You're not on the list. You're the reason the list exists." Before she could respond, he kissed her. Soft, certain, a promise more than passion. "I love you," he said against her lips. "I know." "That's it? I know?" Nina smiled. "I love you too, but you already knew that." "Still nice to hear." They rejoined the party as the sun set. Speeches were made. Cake was served. James fell asleep in Nina's arms as guests began leaving. Julia kissed his forehead before going, promising to see him tomorrow. That night, after everyone had gone and the house was quiet, Nina found Marcus on the terrace with a glass of whiskey. "Celebrating?" "Thinking." "About?" "The merger I didn't sign. The deals I've passed on. The board wants me to step back into full-time leadership. And I don't want to. I want to be here, watch James grow, have dinner with my family, sleep past 5 occasionally. So don't go back." "It's not that simple. I have obligations, employees depending on me." Nina sat beside him. "You have good people, delegate more, work from home, find balance." "Is that what we have? Balance?" "We have something. Maybe balance isn't the right word. Integration, maybe. Life fitting together in unexpected ways." Marcus was quiet, considering. "I could restructure, promote Davidson to CEO, keep a chairman role, advisory mostly. Would that make you happy?" "Being here makes me happy. The work just pays for it." "Then you have your answer. Seats." The restructuring took 3 months. Marcus stepped back gradually, maintaining oversight but delegating daily operations. He converted the East Wing into offices, working from home most days. Nina returned to part-time nursing at the local hospital, specializing in infant care. She needed to help other babies, she said, to honor both Sophia and James. Their wedding was small. Family only in the garden on a September afternoon. James toddled down the aisle carrying rings he promptly threw into the fountain. Julia attended with her boyfriend, now fiancé. Eleanor cried through the entire ceremony, then denied it at the reception. Nina wore her mother's dress, altered to fit. She'd found it preserved in tissue at her aunt's house. Marcus wore the suit he'd bought for their first official date, 6 months after that first terrible night. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves. Nina promised to love not just the man he was, but the father he'd become. Marcus promised to hold space for all her grief and joy equally, to never ask her to choose between memory and present. "You saved us," he said at the altar. "In every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," she corrected. As they kissed, James escaped from Eleanor and ran to them, arms raised. Marcus lifted him, creating a three-way embrace that would be the photo they treasured most. The reception was in the garden. Patricia's children ran wild with James. Julia's parents, initially suspicious, warmed to Nina after she spent an hour discussing their orchid collection. Even Mrs. Chen, the household manager who'd once questioned Nina's presence, offered a toast to the couple who'd taught her that family comes in unexpected forms. As evening fell, Nina and Marcus swayed on the improvised dance floor. James slept in Eleanor's arms nearby. "No regrets?" Marcus asked. "None. Even the hard parts?" "Especially those. They brought us here." He spun her gently. "Where do you think here leads?" "I don't know. Maybe more children. Maybe travel. Maybe just this, extended indefinitely." "I could live with indefinitely." They danced as stars emerged overhead. Guests drifted home. James stirred, reaching for them. They collected him, swaying together. A family formed not from planning, but from desperate need and unexpected grace. 2 years later, Nina stood in the same nursery, different child in her arms. Their daughter, Sophia Marie, named for the sister she'd never meet, but whose memory made her possible. James, now 3, peered at the baby suspiciously. "She's wrinkly." "You were wrinkly once too," Nina told him. "No. Very wrinkly, like a raisin." James giggled. "Mama's silly." Marcus entered carrying coffee. He'd been up all night with Nina during labor, refusing to leave even when nurses suggested he rest. "How are my girls?" "Perfect," Nina said, though exhaustion weighed her words. He kissed her forehead, then Sophia's. "James, want to hold your sister?" They arranged him carefully on the sofa, placing Sophia in his arms with support. He studied her seriously. "She's mine?" "She's ours," Nina said. "All of ours." "Forever?" "Forever." James nodded, satisfied. "Okay, but I'm not sharing my trucks." That evening, as Nina recovered, visitors arrived. Eleanor first, bearing soup and unsolicited advice. Julia next, with gifts and genuine warmth. She'd married her professor, was pregnant herself. The 2 women who'd once competed now compared symptoms and nursery plans. Patricia flew in from Seattle, declaring Sophia the most beautiful baby ever born, then amending it to second most beautiful when James looked offended. Even Mrs. Chen, preparing to retire, stopped by with a hand-knitted blanket. "For the new little miss," she said, tears threatening her professional composure. As night settled, Nina sat nursing Sophia while Marcus read to James. The same chair where everything began. Different child, different circumstances, but the same essential truth. Love arrives in unexpected ways, through loss and discovery, through pain, transformed to purpose. "You okay?" Marcus asked later, finding her standing at the window. "I'm thinking about the first Sophia. Tell me, I wonder if she sent us here. If somehow she knew I'd need this family, that you'd need me, that James would be the bridge between my grief and my future." Marcus wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Maybe she did. You believe that?" "I believe in things I can't explain, like why I came home early that night, why you answered my call when you had every reason not to, why James only accepted you. Call it fate, or coincidence, or Sophia's intervention. I just know I'm grateful." Nina leaned back against him. "Me too." Through the nursery door, they could hear Eleanor singing to both children. Some Welsh lullaby from her own childhood. James's voice joined occasionally, making up words he didn't know. "We built something good," Nina said. "We built something real." Even better. They stood watching the city lights, holding each other, listening to their families' voices weaving together in the darkness. Not the family either had planned, but the one they'd fought to create and chosen to keep. 5 years passed. James started school, precocious and kind. Sophia grew into a force of nature, inheriting Nina's determination and Marcus's stubborn streak. They moved to a slightly smaller house in Westchester, closer to good schools, and farther from Marcus's old life of constant deals and social obligations. Nina opened a lactation consulting practice, helping other mothers navigate feeding challenges. Her story, once tabloid fodder, became inspiration for families facing similar struggles. She spoke at medical conferences about the intersection of grief and caregiving, about finding purpose in unexpected places. Marcus ran a foundation supporting single parents and child care initiatives. He'd discovered that stepping back from corporate life didn't mean stepping back from impact. If anything, the work felt more meaningful now, grounded in personal experience rather than abstract charity. They hosted Sunday dinners that had become legendary in their circle. Eleanor presiding over chaos with grace, Julia and her family regular fixtures, Patricia visiting when she could. Even some of Nina's colleagues from the hospital, drawn into their expanding definition of family. One evening, as Nina tucked Sophia into bed, the little girl asked, "Mama, why do I have two names?" Nina sat on the bed's edge. "You're named after your sister who couldn't stay. Where did she go?" "Somewhere we can't see but always feel." Sophia considered this. "Like the wind." "Exactly like the wind." "Is she lonely?" Nina's throat tightened. "No, baby. She has us remembering her. That keeps her company." "Good. I don't want her lonely." Later, Nina found Marcus in his study, reviewing foundation grant proposals. She curled into his lap, surprising him. "Hey." Sophia asked about her name. "What did you tell her?" "The truth. Simplified, but true." "How'd she take it?" "She wanted to make sure the first Sophia wasn't lonely." Marcus held her tighter. "She's your daughter, all right. Worried about everyone else's feelings." "Our daughter." "All ours." They sat quietly, comfortable in shared silence. Through the window, they could see the garden where they'd been married, where James had taken his first steps, where they'd planted a cherry tree for Sophia's first birthday, where life had taken root in unlikely soil and flourished despite everything. "Any regrets?" Marcus asked, their old ritual. "None," Nina answered, their traditional response. But tonight, she added, "Only gratitude." "For what specifically?" "For you coming home that night. For being desperate enough to call me back. For your mother's meddling. For Julia's growth. For James's resilience. For Sophia's existence. Both of them. For this imperfect, impossible, beautiful life we've built." Marcus kissed her temple. "When you put it like that, I'm grateful too." Upstairs, they heard giggling. James was probably in Sophia's room again, telling stories about dragons and spaceships. They'd find them asleep together in the morning, curled like puppies. "Should we intervene?" Nina asked without moving. "Let them be. They're writing their own story." "Like we did?" "Like we are. Present tense. Still writing." Nina smiled against his shoulder. "Good. I don't want it to end." "It won't. Just keeps evolving." Outside, wind chimes sang in the garden. The same chimes Eleanor had hung their first Christmas together, insisting every house needed music. Now, they couldn't imagine the sound of home without them. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Julia. "Tomorrow still good for James's soccer game?" He showed Nina, who smiled. "Tell her we'll save seats." "All of us?" "The whole circus." He typed back confirmation. Their family had become something beyond traditional definition. Ex-wives and mothers-in-law, children born and lost, connections forged through crisis and choice rather than mere blood. It shouldn't work, but it did. The next morning arrived with its usual chaos. Breakfast negotiations, lost homework, Sophia insisting on wearing a tutu to James's soccer game. Nina managed it all with practiced efficiency, while Marcus packed snacks, and Eleanor offered commentary from behind her newspaper. At the field, they spread out like an invading army. Blankets, chairs, a cooler that could stock a small store. Julia arrived with her husband and new baby. The two families merged seamlessly, children running between adults, sharing food and gossip. James scored a goal, his first of the season. The entire extended clan erupted in cheers that drew stares from other families. James beamed, waving at his crowd of supporters. "We're those people," Nina laughed to Marcus. "The ones who bring everyone to everything." "Good. Let them wonder how it works." "Magic," Eleanor interjected. "It works on pure magic and stubbornness." After the game, they went for ice cream. 15 people descending on a small shop like locusts. The teenage staff looked overwhelmed until Sophia charmed them with her missing front teeth and declaration that chocolate was the best thing humans ever invented. As they sat outside, children decorated with melted treats, adults discussing schools and schedules, Nina caught Marcus watching her. "What? Just thinking about that first night. How you looked holding James, fierce and fragile simultaneously." "I was terrified." "Me too. But we did it anyway." The terrifying things often turn out best. Julia approached, carrying her sleeping infant. "Nina, can I ask your professional opinion?" She's struggling with latching. They discussed techniques, while Marcus and Julia's husband debated baseball. Eleanor supervised the older children's second round of ice cream. Life swirled around them, messy and loud and perfect. That evening, after baths and stories and the long negotiation of bedtime, Nina found Marcus on their bedroom balcony. He'd opened a bottle of wine, the good stuff they saved for occasions. "What are we celebrating?" "Today." "Just today?" "Every today. But especially this one." She accepted a glass, leaning against the railing. Their neighbor's cat stalked through the garden below, hunting shadows. "I've been thinking," she said, always dangerous, "about expanding the practice, taking on partners, growing it into something bigger." "That's wonderful. It would mean more travel, conferences, training sessions." "We'll manage. And I want to write a book about all of it. Sophia, James, us. The whole messy truth." Marcus turned to her. "Are you sure? It would mean going public again. But on our terms this time, our story, our words." "Then do it. I'll help however you need." Nina smiled. "Even if I describe that first night honestly? Your face when you found me? Especially then, people should know how wrong first impressions can be." They stood together as stars emerged above. Somewhere in the house, Sophia called out in her sleep. They waited, listening, but she settled without intervention. "She's getting independent," Nina observed. "Too fast." "They both are." "Maybe we should have another." Nina looked at him. "Another baby?" "Why not? We're good at this. The chaos, the love, all of it. You realize we're officially outnumbered already? Eleanor helps. Julia helps. We have a village." Nina considered. "I'm 37. So? Just stating facts. Is that a no?" She was quiet, then smiled. "It's a maybe. Let's see where life leads." "It led us here." Good point. They went inside, checking on both children. James sprawled across his bed like he'd been dropped from height. Sophia curled tight, thumb in mouth despite their efforts to break the habit. Both perfect in their imperfection. In their own bed, they lay facing each other. Marcus traced Nina's face with one finger, memorizing lines that hadn't been there 5 years ago. Laugh lines, she called them, evidence of joy. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "Yes." She laughed, soft in the darkness. "That makes no sense." "Makes perfect sense to me." They fell asleep, intertwined, breathing synchronized. Down the hall, Eleanor watched late-night television with subtitles. In the kitchen, the dishwasher hummed through its cycle. The house settled into its nighttime rhythm, holding its occupants safe in ordinary grace. The book took 2 years to write. Nina carved out early mornings before the house woke, wrestling words onto pages. Marcus read drafts, offering memories she'd forgotten or perspectives she hadn't considered. Even Julia contributed, writing a chapter about postpartum depression and the courage required to step back. When it published, the response overwhelmed them. Letters from mothers who'd made similar choices, from fathers who'd struggled with single parenthood, from nurses who'd crossed professional boundaries for compassion, from families built in unconventional ways. Nina did a small book tour, always returning home quickly. Marcus and the children attended when they could, their presence grounding her when strangers' stories grew heavy. At a signing in Chicago, a young woman approached with an infant in a carrier. "You saved my life," she said simply. "Not literally, but in every way that matters. I lost my son 2 years ago. Reading your story helped me understand that grief and love can coexist, that helping another child honors the one I lost." Nina signed her book through tears. That night, in the hotel, she called Marcus. "I want to come home. Tour's not done for 3 more days. I know, but I need to be home." "Then come home." She flew back that night, arriving at dawn. Marcus met her at the door. "Kids are still sleeping." "Good." He led her to the garden, where morning light filtered through leaves. They sat on the bench they'd installed for their 5th anniversary, engraved with all their children's names, including the first Sophia. "Too much?" he asked. "Too much truth. Too many people carrying similar pain. I want to help them all." "You are helping. The book, your practice, just existing as proof that survival is possible." "It doesn't feel like enough." Marcus pulled her close. "It's not your job to heal everyone." "I know. But knowing and feeling are different things." They sat until children's voices drew them inside. Sophia had attempted breakfast independently. Cereal covered most surfaces. James was trying to help, but mostly spreading the mess. "Mama!" Sophia shrieked, launching herself at Nina. "You're supposed to be in Portland," James said suspiciously. "I missed you too much." "Good. Dad can't do ponytails right." The morning dissolved into familiar chaos. Extra breakfast because the first attempt was largely on the floor. Arguments about television. Negotiations over weekend plans. Eleanor emerging to survey the damage with raised eyebrows. Normal. Beautifully, impossibly normal. Later, while children played and Eleanor gardened, Nina and Marcus cleaned the kitchen together. "I want to create a retreat," Nina said suddenly, "for bereaved mothers. Somewhere they can grieve and heal without judgment." "Where?" "I don't know. Somewhere quiet. Safe. We could look at properties upstate. Use the foundation for initial funding." "You'd do that?" "Nina, I'd build you a castle if you asked." "I don't need a castle. Just space for healing. Then we'll find it." The search took 6 months. They found it finally in the Berkshires, an old estate with multiple buildings surrounded by woods and walking paths. It needed work, but had potential. They brought the children to see it. James immediately claimed a climbing tree. Sophia found a stream and declared it fairy territory. Eleanor walked the grounds slowly, nodding approval. "This could work," she said. Renovations took a year. Nina oversaw every detail while maintaining her practice and family. Marcus managed contractors and permits. Eleanor designed gardens. Even Julia contributed, her finance professor husband helping structure the non-profit entity. The retreat opened quietly. No media, no fanfare. Just a small ceremony with family and the first group of mothers. 6 women who'd lost children to various circumstances. They would stay a week, supported by therapists, nurses, and each other. Nina welcomed them personally, standing in the main house's living room where she'd insisted on hanging portraits of all the children, those lost and those living. "This is a space for all of you," she said. "The woman you were before loss, the one you are now, the one you're becoming. All are welcome here." The first night, she stayed to make sure everything ran smoothly. She found the women gathered in the kitchen at midnight, sharing stories over tea. Not therapy, just connection. The raw, necessary connection of shared experience. She called Marcus from her room. "How's it going?" "They're healing each other already, just by being in the same space. You did this. You made this possible. We did this. Okay, we did this. But it was your vision and your support that made it real. Partnership, then. Always." The retreat grew slowly, carefully. They never took more than 8 women at a time, maintaining intimacy. Some stayed a week. Some returned quarterly. All left with something they hadn't arrived with: permission to grieve and live simultaneously. James and Sophia grew accustomed to their mother's absences, understanding the work's importance. Marcus covered bedtimes and homework, Eleanor filling gaps with stories and cookies. One autumn evening, with Nina away at the retreat, Marcus sat with both children doing homework. Sophia, now 8, struggled with fractions. James, 13 and newly teenaged, typed an essay with dramatic sighs. "Dad," Sophia said, "why does Mom help sad women?" "Because she was a sad woman once. Someone helped her, so now she helps others." "Was that someone you?" Marcus considered. "Maybe, but she helped herself mostly. And me. And all of us." James looked up. "I remember when she first came. Not clearly, but impressions. She smelled different from Mom. From Julia Mom, I mean." They'd worked hard to help James understand his 2 mothers. Julia Mom, who gave birth to him, but needed to heal elsewhere. Nina Mom, who chose him when he needed choosing. Different how? Like safety. Like when you're scared, but someone says it's okay and you believe them. Marcus's throat tightened. That's a good memory to have. "Dad," Sophia asked, "will you tell us the real story someday? Not the kid version?" "When you're ready." "I'm ready now." "No, you're not." "How do you know?" "Because you still think fractions are the hardest thing you'll face." She made a face and returned to homework. But James watched his father thoughtfully. Later, after Sophia was in bed, James found Marcus on the porch. "I know more than you think." "About?" "Nina. The beginning. I heard kids at school talking about the articles from back then." Marcus sighed. "What did you hear?" "That she saved me in a weird way. That people judged her for it. That you almost lost custody because of it." "All true. But you fought for her. For us. The best fight of my life." James sat beside him. I'm glad you won. Me too. Does it bother you that I have two moms? Does it bother you? James considered. Sometimes, when I have to explain it, but mostly I feel lucky. Some kids don't even have one mom who wants them. I have two. That's a mature perspective. Nina Mom says complexity builds character. Marcus laughed. She would. They sat quietly, watching fireflies rise from the garden. The same garden where they'd been married. Where Sophia had taken her first steps. Where life continued its patient accumulation of moments. Dad? Yeah? Thanks. For fighting. For all of it. Marcus pulled his son closer. Always. Nina returned the next morning, tired but glowing with purpose. The retreat session had been particularly powerful. Breakthrough moments. Connections formed that would last beyond the week. She found her family at breakfast, Sophia demonstrating her new understanding of fractions using toast pieces. James pretending to be too cool for family breakfast while secretly enjoying it. Eleanor reading news on her tablet, occasionally sharing outrageous headlines. Marcus presiding over it all with coffee and contentment. Mama! Sophia abandoned her toast demonstration to hug Nina. How were the sad ladies? She asked, getting less sad. Did you fix them? Nobody needs fixing, baby. Sometimes people just need witness. Someone to see their pain and say it's real. Oh. Sophia considered this. Like when I fell off my bike and you said my hurt was valid? Exactly like that. Over Eleanor's protests about proper nutrition, they ordered pizza for dinner. The family sprawled in the living room, boxes open on the coffee table, watching a movie Sophia had chosen about singing animals. This is terrible, James declared. This is wonderful, Sophia countered. This is family movie night, Marcus said. Quality is irrelevant. Amen, Eleanor added, stealing another slice. Nina looked around at them, her unlikely, impossible family, built from loss and found through courage, maintained by choice and strengthened by challenge. Not perfect, never perfect, but absolutely, unquestionably hers. The movie played on. Sophia sang along off-key. James pretended not to know the words while mouthing them. Eleanor dozed despite the volume. Marcus held Nina's hand, thumb tracing circles on her palm. Any regrets? He whispered. Their old ritual. None, she answered, their traditional response. But tonight she thought about all the paths that led here, the losses that preceded the gains. The first Sophia who made the second possible. The night she'd made a desperate choice that changed everything. Actually, one regret, she amended. Marcus looked concerned. What? That we can't do it all over again. The meeting, the fighting, the falling, the whole messy journey. Why would you want to repeat that? Because every step led here, and here is perfect. He kissed her temple. Here is perfect. On screen, animated animals reached their triumphant finale. Sophia cheered. James groaned. Eleanor woke with a start. Life continued its patient forward movement, carrying them all toward futures they couldn't imagine but would face together. Later, in the quiet of their room, Nina told Marcus about the retreat session. The woman who'd lost twins. The one whose child died in an accident she blamed herself for. The teenager who'd given up a baby and grieved the absence. They're all so brave, she said. Surviving takes such courage. You would know. We would know. We both survived, just differently. Marcus was quiet, then said, I've been thinking about James's question, about telling them the full story. They're still young, but getting older, and better they hear it from us than piece together from internet searches. Nina considered. Maybe we start slowly. Age-appropriate pieces. Build toward the full truth. Like chapters? Like life. One revelation at a time. They agreed to begin at Sunday dinner. The whole family gathered as usual. Julia and her family. Patricia visiting from Seattle. Eleanor presiding over chaos. As dessert was served, Marcus clinked his glass. James asked about our origin story this week. We thought it was time to share some of it. The adults exchanged glances. The children leaned forward. Nina began. I came to work for your father when James was very sick as a baby. How sick? Sophia asked. Very. He wouldn't eat. Doctors were worried. But you fixed him, James said. I helped him. In an unusual way that some people didn't understand. What way? Sophia demanded. Nina glanced at Marcus, who nodded. I fed him myself, the way mothers feed babies naturally. Sophia's eyes widened. But you weren't his mother yet. No, but I'd lost a baby. My body didn't know she was gone, and James needed what I could provide. The room was silent. Even Eleanor stopped cutting her pie. So you saved him, James said quietly. We saved each other. Julia spoke up. I was sick too, in a different way. I couldn't be the mother James needed then. Nina could. That's why our family looks different from others. Is that why you have two moms? Sophia asked James. Part of why. Patricia added, families form in all sorts of ways. Love matters more than logistics. The children absorbed this, processing at their own speeds. Tell us more, James requested. So they did. Carefully, honestly, appropriately. About Marcus's fear and anger, Nina's grief and courage, the slow building of trust, the choice to stay, to try, to become. It's like a fairy tale, Sophia declared, but real. Real is better than fairy tales, Eleanor said. Real lasts. After dinner, as adults cleaned and children played, Julia approached Nina. That was brave, telling them they deserve truth. Not everyone would agree. Good thing we're not everyone. Julia smiled. No, we're something much more interesting. Years flowed like water. James left for college, studying engineering with a minor in philosophy. He called weekly, visited monthly, brought friends home who marveled at his unconventional family. Sophia grew into her fierce spirit, championing causes from climate change to cafeteria food quality. She volunteered at the retreat, teaching art to grieving mothers, understanding intuitively what they needed. Nina's book became required reading in several nursing programs. She spoke less frequently now, preferring the quiet work of individual healing to public platforms. The retreat expanded to 3 locations, each maintaining the intimate scale that made transformation possible. Marcus transitioned further from business, teaching occasionally at the local university. He found unexpected joy in shaping young minds, in possibilities rather than profits. Eleanor, approaching 90, moved slower but remained sharp. She documented family stories, creating archives for future generations. Someone needs to remember, she insisted, typing steadily on her tablet. On James's college graduation day, the entire extended family converged. Julia and her husband with their 2 younger children. Patricia's clan from Seattle. Friends who'd become family over the years. They filled 3 rows, embarrassing James with their enthusiasm. At the celebration dinner, James stood to speak. Most people thank their parents at graduations. I need to thank my village. Mom, he looked at Julia. Thank you for having the courage to step back when you needed to. Nina, his voice caught. Thank you for stepping forward when I needed you to. Dad, Thank you for being brave enough to let love look different than expected. He continued, acknowledging Eleanor, Patricia, stepfathers and step-siblings, the whole complex web that held him. I used to think our family was weird. Now I know it's revolutionary. We chose each other. Every day, we choose each other. That's the best education I ever received. There wasn't a dry eye at the table. Later, as they walked across campus, Nina and Marcus fell behind the group. "We did good," she said. "We did extraordinary. He's going to change the world." He already has, just by existing, by proving that love transcends structure. They watched their son ahead, laughing with his sister, surrounded by family in all its forms. "Any regrets?" Marcus asked. "None," Nina replied, and meant it completely. The final chapter came quietly, as final chapters often do. Eleanor passed in her sleep at 92, peaceful in the bed she'd claimed in the guest house years before. They found her with a smile, her tablet open to a photo of the whole family at Sophia's high school graduation. The funeral drew hundreds, people whose lives she'd touched, directly or peripherally. The church overflowed with flowers and stories. James and Sophia spoke together, voices harmonizing in grief and gratitude. "She taught us that family is a verb," Sophia said. "Something you do, not something you are." "She showed us that love multiplies when divided," James added, "that there's always room for one more at the table." Nina held Marcus as he grieved his mother, the last parent, the last link to his original family. But surrounded by the family they'd built, the loss felt bearable, held by many hands instead of crushing. They buried Eleanor beside the first Sophia in the cemetery Nina had chosen years before. Two souls who'd never met, but whose existence made everything else possible. After the service, the family gathered at the house. Stories flowed like wine. Laughter mingled with tears. Julia's youngest played with Sophia's boyfriend's puppy. James and his partner organized food with practiced efficiency. Life continued its dance even in death's shadow. That night, Nina found Marcus in Eleanor's room at the guest house, going through her things. "Look at this," he said, holding a notebook. It was filled with Eleanor's handwriting, notes about each family member, observations, worries, points of pride, a grandmother's secret record of love. Nina's entry read, "The daughter I prayed for, but didn't know I was praying for. Taught us all that breaking can be building, if you do it right." They sat on Eleanor's bed reading her observations. Funny, touching, occasionally sharp as her tongue had been. "She saw everything," Marcus said, "and loved anyway. Because of, not despite." They packed Eleanor's things slowly over the following weeks, distributing treasures among family, donating clothes to the retreat, keeping what mattered, releasing what didn't. In her desk, they found a letter addressed to them jointly, dated a year prior. "My dear ones," it began, "if you're reading this, I've moved on to whatever comes next. Don't mourn too long. I've had a magnificent life, made richer by watching you build yours. Take care of each other. Take care of the children. Take care of the truth. It's the only thing that lasts. All my love, Eleanor. P.S. Nina, you were never the outsider. You were the missing piece we didn't know we were missing. Thank you for completing us." They framed the letter, hanging it in the study where difficult decisions were made and important conversations happened. Life restructured around Eleanor's absence. Sunday dinners continued, but felt different. Her chair at the head of the table remained empty for months, before Sophia quietly took it one evening, saying Eleanor would hate the waste of a perfectly good seat. James started graduate school, studying biomedical engineering with focus on infant nutrition. "Full circle," he said when announcing his decision. Sophia chose social work, surprising no one. She'd been solving people's problems since she could talk. Nina expanded the retreat program to include workshops for families. Not just mothers, but entire support systems learning to hold grief together. Marcus taught some sessions, his business mind helping structure sustainable healing practices. Their story became teaching tale. Not the sensationalized version that had once made headlines, but the real story. Messy, complicated, human. They spoke at conferences together, demonstrating that redemption was possible, that families could be built from broken pieces. On their 15th wedding anniversary, they renewed their vows in the garden. Same spot, same witnesses, plus new additions. Grandchildren now, James's twins and Sophia's adopted daughter. The circle widening with each generation. Nina wore a simple dress. Marcus cried through his vows again, but this time the words were different. 15 years ago, I promised to love you, he said. Now I promise to keep choosing you, even when choice seems impossible. To honor not just our love, but our entire story. The pain that preceded joy, the losses that enabled gains, the courage you taught me by example. Nina responded, "You gave me a second chance at motherhood, a first chance at partnership, a lifetime of chances to be more than my grief. I promise to keep taking those chances, to keep believing in our particular magic." As they kissed, surrounded by the family they'd assembled through crisis and choice, Nina thought about the first Sophia, about the 17 minutes that had defined and nearly destroyed her. Those minutes had led here, to this garden, this moment, this impossible abundance of love. That night, after guests had gone and grandchildren were asleep, Nina and Marcus sat on their porch. The same porch where they'd made every major decision, where they'd grieved Eleanor, where they'd celebrated victories and weathered storms. "Any regrets?" Marcus asked, though they both knew the answer. "None," Nina replied, then added, "Actually, no, that's not true anymore." Marcus looked alarmed. "What?" "I regret that we only get one lifetime. I'd do this again and again if I could, every version of us." He pulled her closer. "Who says we only get one? Physics, biology, reality. We've never let reality limit us before." Nina laughed. "Good point." They sat watching stars appear overhead. Somewhere in the house, a grandchild stirred. One of their children would handle it, the next generation taking their turn at midnight, comforting. "I've been thinking about the retreat," Nina said. "Expanding again?" "No. Transitioning. Training the next generation to run it. Stepping back." "Really?" "I'm tired, Marcus. Good tired, fulfilled tired, but tired." "So what would you do?" "Be a grandmother. Write another book. Garden. Love you without distraction." "I could live with that." "Yeah? I've been thinking about stepping back, too. From teaching. From the foundation. Let younger minds take over." "And do what?" "Whatever we want. Travel. Read. Sit on this porch and watch sunsets." Nina turned to look at him. Gray now dominated his hair. Lines mapped his face, but his eyes remained the same. The man who'd stormed into a nursery and found his salvation. "That sounds perfect." "Then let's do it." "Just like that?" "Why not? We've earned the right to easy choices." Over the following months, They transitioned responsibilities. James took over much of the retreat's operations. Sophia managed the foundation. They resisted at first, claiming they weren't ready. But Nina and Marcus knew better. Readiness was a myth. You became ready by doing. The final retreat session Nina led was for women who'd lost children over 20 years ago. Old grief, they called it. The kind that had scarred over but never fully healed. She sat with them in the circle she'd sat in hundreds of times. Grief doesn't end, she told them. It transforms, from sharp to soft, from constant to occasional, from destroyer to teacher. My daughter would be 28 now. I don't know who she would have been, but I know who I am because of her. That's the gift hidden in the loss. Not consolation, not compensation, just truth. We become who we are through what we survive. The women nodded, understanding without explanation. Later, during the closing ceremony, they each spoke their child's name aloud. Nina said Sophia, and felt the familiar ache and gratitude intertwined. That evening, she handed the keys to James. It's yours now. I'm not ready. No one ever is. That's what makes it worth doing. He hugged her tight. Thank you for everything. For choosing us when you could have walked away. I couldn't have walked away. You all had my heart from that first night. Even Dad? Even after what he did? Especially him. He was just a terrified father trying to save his son. I understood that terror. It made us family before we knew we were family. The retirement years arrived gently. Nina and Marcus traveled to places they'd always discussed, but never visited. They returned to help with grandchildren, attended every recital and game, hosted Sunday dinners that grew increasingly chaotic as the family expanded. Nina wrote another book. Fiction this time. A novel about women who built families from loss. It sold modestly, but touched readers deeply. She received letters from around the world, stories of similar journeys. Marcus learned woodworking, filling the garage with increasingly ambitious projects. He built cradles for new grandchildren, bookshelves for Sophia's office, a gazebo for the retreat's garden. His hands, once soft from office work, grew calloused and capable. They celebrated their 25th anniversary quietly. Just the two of them at a beach cottage, watching waves restructure sand with patient persistence. We did it, Nina said. Did what? Built a life, a family, a legacy. We're not done yet. No, but we've done the hard part. What was the hard part? Beginning. Having the courage to begin. Marcus considered. And the rest? The rest is momentum. Love in motion stays in motion. That's not physics. It's better than physics. It's us. The call came on a Tuesday. Marcus had been in the garden when the chest pain started. Nina found him sitting on the bench by Sophia's roses, gray-faced but smiling. Just need a moment, he said. The ambulance arrived quickly. The surgery went well, but recovery was slow, difficult. His body, never particularly strong, struggled with the trauma. Nina stayed by his bedside, reading aloud from their history. Eleanor's letters, James's graduation speech, Sophia's poetry, the accumulated evidence of their life together. Any regrets? She asked on a particularly bad night. None, he whispered. Then, you? Only that we can't start over. Do it all again. Maybe we can. Marcus, not literally, but through them. James, Sophia, the grandchildren, they carry our story forward. Remake it in their own image. That's beautiful. That's legacy. He recovered slowly, but incompletely. The man who'd once worked 18-hour days now tired after short walks. But he adapted, finding joy in smaller circles. Garden to porch, kitchen to study. Always with Nina nearby. They watched James's twins start school. Sophia's daughter take her first steps. New babies arrive, carrying names of those lost but not forgotten. The family tree growing ever more complex, roots deepening with each generation. On a spring morning, 30 years after that first terrible, wonderful night, Nina found Marcus in the nursery. Not their current home's nursery, but the original, in the estate now owned by James. They'd come for Sunday dinner, and he'd wandered off. "Remembering?" she asked, feeling grateful. "For you walking through that door? For having the courage to stay? For saving us all? We saved each other. Still." She sat beside him in the rocking chair they'd kept all these years. It creaked under their combined weight, protesting age but holding firm. "If you could change anything, would you?" Marcus asked. "Not a single moment. Not even the pain?" "Especially not the pain. It taught us to recognize joy." Through the window, they could see the garden where they'd been married, where grandchildren now played, where Eleanor's ashes were scattered among the roses, where the first Sophia's memory bloomed each spring in fresh flowers. "I love you," Marcus said, words worn smooth by repetition but never diminished. "I love you too. Any regrets?" "None." "Never?" "Never. Not one. This life, our life, it's been perfect." "Perfect's a strong word. Perfect doesn't mean easy. It means complete. We're complete." As sunset painted the nursery gold, they sat together in the chair where everything began. Two people who'd found each other in crisis and chosen each other through decades, who'd built a family from fragments and healed wounds by acknowledging them. The house filled with voices as family gathered for dinner, calling them down, calling them home. They rose slowly, Marcus leaning on Nina, Nina steadying Marcus, walking together toward the sound of their family, their legacy, their perfect, imperfect life. At the doorway, Marcus paused. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For everything that came after that first night. Thank you for letting it." They descended the stairs together, toward laughter and chaos and love. Always love. The kind that transforms tragedy to triumph, strangers to family, endings to beginnings. And in the nursery behind them, the rocking chair continued its gentle movement, pushed by memory or breeze or the ghost of every mother who'd ever sung a child to sleep, continuing its rhythm, continuing its purpose, continuing.